All right, everyone. So in this final presentation of the workshop, I want to give you some pointers to the things that we couldn't cover in this brief introduction to ggplot. But there's really still a lot to be discovered, and we didn't want to let you go without at least giving you some ideas of where you could go from here. So I was already speaking of a Tidyverse core and then Tidyverse extended, or a Tidyverse ecosphere, and mostly we focused on the core, right? We've worked with ggplot to create presentation visualizations. We used dplyr, readr, tibble, and tidyverse to get the data into the right shape. In fact, you've even briefly seen also an application of 4cats when we used factors to make sure that the colors are sorted the right way. And there are two other packages in the Tidyverse and the core Tidyverse that are really cool, but have nothing to do with the visualization, and that string R and per. And on top of that, there is really an entire ecosphere. And that is one visualizations of packages that also exist that I could find. But even that is only a small fraction of all of the packages that have been built to interact with the Tidyverse. And yeah, now I want to show you a few of them and what they can do for you with a focus on visualization, but also a couple of other things that showing you functionality that you may not normally associate with R. So yeah, one of them that's clearly in the domain of plotting and in visualization is GTAAnimate. And GTAAnimate is a really cool package that interacts really well with ggplot. In fact, usually you only need to add like one extra line in order to generate a visualization such as this one, right? So this is data that you've analyzed yourself. It's year and then the mean of wealth. And this is the code you've pretty much wrote yourself in the previous, or partly in the previous practical. And if you want to show just the development across time, you just add transition reveal year, and they will automatically generate a sequence of images for every individual year, or even steps in between. And then if you want, bind them together, for instance, as a GIF that you can use in a web presentation such as this one. This also works with maps, right? So maybe you want to show how the distribution of income in the map changes, right? Then you just created map the same way we've done before, and at the end add slightly different versions of what you just seen, transition states year, and then it will create images for every year, and if you want, bind them together as a GIF, right? There's not all too much happening, as you can see, but there are some changes across the years, right? So for instance, Bettingen only lights up, really lights up the last few years, suggesting that there was a particularly strong change in income for Bettingen in like the last few years. Yeah, another thing that's really cool is Plotly. Plotly by itself is a super powerful visualization engine that is available for R and for Python. And you can also use it in interaction with ggplot. There's a function called ggplotly that takes any ggplot code and makes it Plotly visualization. And the huge benefit of Plotly is that you have JavaScript running in the background that it can use for things such as this, right? You can have like a hover over and provide additional information on each of these data points. It's a bit sort of inside the presentation, it doesn't work the way it would work if you would create it yourself, right? You see there's a little bit of the location of these hover points are a bit different than the actual points. But yeah, you can see what it can do for you, right? Basically, for every single data point in a visualization, you can have a self-specified label shown to you whenever you hover over that point, which is a great visualization and communication tool. Yeah, another thing that you can do, and I think is becoming super popular out there in business, but also in academia, is using Markdown to create reports. So Markdown by itself is not an R feature, but it's a small language in it of itself. It's basically a lean version of LaTeX. that it can use to style documents. And R in RStudio has really great support for it. And it has its own package, R Markdown, that allows you to use Markdown syntax to create reports from within RStudio. And it's super easy and super useful. If you have an analysis and you have a few figures and you want to share them with your colleagues, or even with your superiors, or even with the world out there, you can just combine code chunks, a little bit of text, and then minimal styling, such as these two hash keys, which render Wulff map as a second level header, right? To then create a report in PDF or in HTML. In fact, these slides also, so you cannot only, you can use them for PDF and HTML reports, but you can also use it for slides. And all of these slides have been written within RStudio using Markdown to generate slides from our code. Yeah, another really cool thing to communicate, but also to explore data is Shiny. So Shiny is sort of a set of functions that allow you to create simple web pages that allow you to interact with data in ways that even go beyond what Plotly would give you. So in Shiny, you can create full-fledged dashboards. And what I'm showing you is just sort of the elemental parts of a dashboard where you have a visualization and then you have some form of interacting with that visualization. For instance, here you can create a drop-down menu where you can decide which variable you want to be used to color the different parts of Basel, right? So maybe you want to see it for Genie, and then you can just select that and the plot will change automatically. And now you can imagine what else you could do, right? You can have 10 of these different menus to control all sorts of things. You can have multiple visualizations and so on. So using this, you can create really useful interactive dashboards that allow you to explore data or also keep track of data as it comes in. Yeah, and then there are the cool packages, and now I have like a couple of packages or frameworks that I think are also super useful and illustrate that R really can be used for pretty much any kind of data analytic job out there. So one thing that has become super easy in R is web scraping. So if you want to like read in web pages and process them, there's the Arvest package that makes it really easy, right? And here, these few lines that you see here, they go on the internet, they pull up the entire Wikipedia page for the R programming language. Then using this sort of identifier, it's picking out a particular table within a Wikipedia page. And then those two lines simply say, okay, please process this as a table and make it a tibble in the end. And so in these few lines, we've gone on the Wikipedia page and pulled on a table from that page such that we can work with it within R, such as if it was, I don't know, a CSV file that we just read in, right? And that it can do for any web page out there. You see a table on the internet, it's only a few functions until you can actually operate on that table within your R session. Yeah, another thing that you may not usually associate with R, but where the Tidyverse, the extended Tidyverse gives you great functionality is text analysis. There's this awesome package, TidyText, that you can use to do basic text operations, but also more advanced stuff such as topic models or sentiment analysis, etc. Right? Here's a simple application where you use the web page that I just read in on the previous page and I create a word cloud from the R web page. So this is the word cloud created from the Wikipedia page on R, and it tells you that the Wikipedia page on R is a lot about programming and users. And for some reason, September, maybe that's the month R was created. Yeah, and the last thing I want to point to is, or maybe it's, no, not quite. The second last thing I want to point to is that R has also made great strides towards providing really good machine learning functionality. There's been always a few machine learning packages that were great. There's Caret, there's MLR. But in recent years, the RStudio people have created tidy models, which is meant to supersede these models and provide basically Tidyverse style functionality for machine learning, where you have different elements that you can sort of in a modular fashion put together however you want to put together, right? So that you can, I don't know, have bootstrap sampling for all different a model. So you just add a bootstrap sampler to your current model, and then it's going to be bootstrap or cross-validation or whatever. So that's pretty new. That just came out, and I have to say I've also I have to look into what exactly it can do. But it looks like it really provides almost all functionality you would want in terms of machine learning, up to wrappers, for instance, for keras, allowing you to specify deep neural networks. Yeah, and the last thing I think that's is super cool and also increasingly relevant is that obviously it can also work with databases, right? Most of the examples in R, they're usually they use with like local data stored in CSV files, but obviously you can also have your data in a remote database and you can interact with this. And there's a lot of functionality coming from the RStudio people to allow that. And some of the, and this goes as far as that you can actually connect through a database from within R and then write deploy a code and will automatically translate it into the appropriate query language and then execute it on the remote location, right? So this is showing you a Tibble, but one that is not locally available, but that is actually sort of been linked to from your R session to the remote location where the Tibble sits. Yeah, and there's a bunch more, but obviously we can't show you everything. The last thing we want to show you is that there are obviously a lot of helpful books out there. And the cool thing is a lot of these books are actually freely available. The one book that I really recommend if you want to go into these things that we talked about today is this one here, R for Data Science, which could also be called Tidyverse, because that's the book that really introduces you to the key packages in the Tidyverse, dplyr, ggplot, and everything around it. And the other books are useful as well, and most of them are available freely. This is the one I mentioned earlier, the YAR book, The Pirate's Guide to R. So this, again, is from my buddy, Nathaniel Phillips, and it's a very entertaining introduction to some of the basic features. But yeah, it's not Tidyverse. That's it. That's the end of the workshop. Obviously, that was mostly a primer, right? We cannot show all of the functionality, but we hope you've now understood a bit better how Tidyverse works, what dplyr can do for you, how you can set up ggplots, and if you sort of manage to deal with all of the problems and the practicals for this workshop, I think you're ready for everything else that's out there. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this and are now ready to explore on yourself.